Oh, me, oh, my.
This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
The dress rehearsal, the third preseason game, is in the books. The Lions looked horrible. It's time to panic, right? No, not quite yet. You are listening to the Hindsight 20 podcast. As always, I'm your host, Jerry Mallory, giving you Detroit Lions news, views, and opinions. A proud member of the Detroit Sports Podcast Network. I want to thank each and every one of you for listening. The third preseason game is over. Of course, we'll be talking about that game. We lose 30-9. This is the dress rehearsal. This is of all the preseason games, this is the one that gives you the clearest indication of your team, right? Well, we'll talk about that, the ins and the outs, and why. I'm here to say, just relax, okay? I have a few stats, a few things to throw your way to show you that just because the third preseason game is indeed the dress rehearsal, and you see more of the first team and more of, real game action, don't get too tied up about any score, any result. If you're talking about the preseason in the NFL, just don't do it. I have some reasons why. We're going to break the traditional Lions mode a little bit and talk some fantasy football. We have David Danaker joining us. He has an up-and-coming blog, The Fantasy Platypus. Very unique name. I like it a lot. This guy is a strong NFL mind. The drafts are right around the corner, right? After that third preseason game, the drafts start coming in because for the most part, whoever is healthy, if they're significant fantasy-wise, well, they'll be ready week one. Very slim chance they'll play. Remember that one year the Lions went ahead and fourth preseason game played Jeff Garcia. He broke his foot. He was going to be the starter, taking Joey Harrington's job. That doesn't happen too often. So as you're listening to this podcast, you're either a day or so away from a draft or you're getting right there to that point. So we have David Danaker joining us. I have a 53-man roster prediction. I'm going to tell you right now, there are no real surprises. I think the roster is getting more and more clear. And of all the negatives, and we'll talk about those for the preseason game number one, there were some positive, not as a team, but as individuals. We'll take a look at those. So we're going to get right into a few news and notes. Lions, Jeremy Curley, the experiment, as well as Stephen Ridley, both of them, the experiments have come to an end. Lions releasing Stephen Ridley earlier this week, really enhancing or increasing the odds of Dwayne Washington getting that last spot. The guy is, over 6 feet tall, 230 pounds, runs a 4.4 40, and that is all fine and dandy. How can you apply that to the field? He's been doing that, very solid in kick returns, decent on the ground as well, catching a few balls. His stock is rising to the point where after you listen to this show, you hear my 53-man. Just like most, people's 53-man prediction, he's on the team. Stephen Ridley became expendable. George Wynn, never really done that bad. Just the odd man looking out, I think, once again. So anyways, Ridley signs a contract with the Indianapolis Colts. Potentially to, have a shot at making that team. They have Frank Gore and a few other moving parts there. This could be one of those old tactician moves by the Colts, though. They've got the Lions week one. Ridley's been on the team of the Lions a good part of this offseason. Let's get some plays. Let's get some scheme. Let's get some strategy. Perhaps they've been working on some things specifically for the Colts. Well, what have they been working on? Let's take a look at the playbook. This is some one-upmanship. This is some, and you can't blame them if this is the case while he's there. And then he could provide a punch for them as well. We go ahead and trade for a offensive lineman that, maybe I knew about him when the draft was going on. He was drafted a few years ago, but the name escapes me. It's Brandon Thomas or something like that. Jeremy Curley is traded. This guy can play offensive guard. We've got a lot of injuries. I think he's a body that essentially, we're going to cut Curley for sure. They may end up cutting this new guy as well, but at least he'll have a shot because we do have some injuries. And so that's that. Let's talk about the game for a little bit. Lions are losers in the dress rehearsal, 30-9 at M&T Bank Stadium against the Baltimore Ravens. Joe Flacco's return had a couple of series. He looked sharp in his return from injury. We had a couple guys that looked good as well, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. Just some thoughts and why you should not worry as much. That's how we're going to kind of start this thing off. Don't worry, okay? The team looked bad. Stafford was off. there were a lot of things that happened that weren't good, and the score is indicative of that. But I don't think the score was a complete representation of what we can expect for this team. I'm on my way somewhere this morning. I'm in the car listening to 97.1, and you got people calling in. Yeah, this team might not win one game. Oh, we see they're going to be a 6-win. Don't put the stock you should put in the third preseason game is I get to see my starters more than I will any other preseason game. That's about it. How good or how bad they look. For younger guys, you look at Jameis Winston with Tampa Bay, he's looking good. That's a good sign. Mike Evans, those are young guys. They have things to prove. Dwayne Washington on our team. But when you got a guy like Golden Tate dropping a couple of balls, and he's one of the most sure-handed receivers in the NFL the last 5 years, and he's a veteran, he's been in the league 7-8 years, I'm not worried about Golden Tate dropping balls. If it's Eric Ebron, yeah, because it's been an issue. But, the fact that Golden Tate had a couple of bad drops, I don't factor that in because it happened on the third preseason game. Stafford, it's weird. Stafford is still a bit of a question mark overall, but his poor play I'm not worried about. I'm just not worried about some of the things that took place in this game as much as some people are. And to give you a little bit of proof as to why you should not panic so much about third preseason games, let's go to the last two preseason games for the Detroit Lions, game number 3s. They're both against the Jacksonville Jaguars. You've got 2014, you've got 2015. So let's go to 2014. Now, we won that game. It was here at Ford Field. I believe it was 13-12, the final score. However, the first offense looked bad. Okay. Matt Stafford looked horrible. He was like 5 for 13. He had an interception. His QB rating was like in the 50s. Meanwhile, Blake Bortles pretty much carved up our defense, passing at will to whoever he wanted. It seemed like guys were open the whole time. Okay. Reggie Bush, he had like a 90-yard touchdown. All right. So this is the third preseason game. This is the dress rehearsal. This would tell you Stafford would be bad. This would tell you that our defense would be really bad and Reggie Bush would have a breakout type of year. None of those things happened. But wait, Jerry, it was the third preseason game. This game predicts everything about the regular season. It doesn't work like that. Stafford was not horrible. And for me, the biggest thing that, was not what it was supposed to be was that defense. Because that defense against Jacksonville, that first team defense looked bad. Okay. Blake Bortles, who is turning into a pretty good quarterback, he is showing that he is decent. He looked like Joe Montana, and our defense looked like a piece of Swiss cheese that I put on one of my favorite sandwiches, the corned beef. We know how good the defense was in 2014. Historically good, one of the best certainly in Detroit Lions history, historic pace run D, and very good against the pass. So although it was the third preseason game, it didn't really bear out what the season would hold. Now let's go to 2015, again against the Jacksonville Jaguars. The first team offense looked amazing. Stafford was like 11 for 14. He had 2 touchdowns. It's like, okay, all right, we lost Sue. If the defense can kind of stay, they were top 5 and 14. They can be top 10-ish. With the way this offense is looking, finally, Joe Lombardi's system is clicking. Look out. Well, 1-7, later, and the offense was atrocious until we got rid of Joe Lombardi. Okay, I give you those stories to say, don't put so much stock in game 3. It is the dress rehearsal. I just like the fact that we get to see our players more, Stafford more, and the rest of the team more that's going to play at an extended amount. Doesn't mean if they're good or bad that it's going to translate. I put more stock in looking at new guys and young guys like a Marvin Jones, like a Taylor Decker, because we have not seen them with the Lions. But for the most part, the guys that we know we're going to get, we're going to get that. And don't worry about that score too much. And so one thing I looked at and I said, well, I don't think this was the norm under our new regime here with Caldwell. And I looked up the stats, was the penalties. Now, we had a lot of penalties, okay? Laken Tomlinson with a penalty, Cole Wick, Riley Reef. And some of these penalties were backbreakers. We go from, being at the 10-yard line in the red zone to being like 3rd and 75, okay? And another one was, pretty much a touchdown was taken away from Amir Abdullah. We had some back-breaking penalties. Conceivably, that first-team offense, should have had 2 touchdowns, but penalties kind of negated that. And so I'm like, I think we're a pretty disciplined team under Caldwell. I remember the days of Schwartz, But under Caldwell, I want to say our defense, or rather our penalty situation, was a lot better. So I went ahead and looked it up. And sure enough, last year we were 13th in penalties in terms of fewest penalties. So that's good. You know, it's about middle of the pack, but it was on the good side. Now in 2014, the year we had that dominant defense, we were 26th, you know, and so I think we're getting better. Caldwell teaches discipline. Some of those plays, to me, you know, the after the whistle penalties are the killer. Okay. Lakin Tomlinson with the unnecessary deal. Now, Riley Reifs, it's a new rule. And, you know, anytime it's a new rule, the NFL and those officials, they really get excited about implementing those new rules. So he pulled a guy off his quarterback, which I don't see a problem with, whatever, but it is a penalty. Get it out the way now. You know, now in the future, hey, you can't pull a guy off, which I don't really like, but anyway. Under Schwartz, we know we had plenty of penalties. The final 3 years under Jim Schwartz, we were ranked 29th, 19th, and 26th respectively. You know, it depends on the team, okay? A team like Minnesota prides themselves on low penalties. It's a reason why they're good. However, a team like Seattle, who's ultra aggressive, a lot of years they're one of the most penalized teams, but they're one of the best teams. With this squad, you want to see the penalty, and every team you want to see the penalties lower. But I think our effectiveness and our need to pay attention to detail is important. I think it will be there. I think some of the penalties that we saw this week were aberrations more than anything else. But it remains to be seen. So those are just my thoughts on the game. We're going to switch gears at this point. We're going to talk a little fantasy football and stay right here as we're going to have you guys listen in to a segment we did with David Danaker. All right, guys, as promised, we have Dave Danaker joining us from the Fantasy Football Platypus. What's going on, Dave? Thanks for joining us, bro.
Hey, Jerry. Thanks for having me.
Now, before we get into all of the football goodness, why don't you tell the fine people here at the podcast a little bit about your website, what you do, and what you bring to the table that kind of separates you from some of the other fantasy football sites out there?
Oh, just a long-lived diehard fan of fantasy football, and just personally, I got sick of having 20, 30 browsers open, and to the extreme of just football information, Roto World and whatnot.
Right.
And so I just put together a site that just collaborates a lot of things into just an easy one-stop shop. It's mobile friendly, which that's the part that I use a lot. It's platypusfootball.wordpress.com.
There we go. It's pretty good. I've been using it. Hopefully it will be to my advantage. I want everybody to go ahead and check it out too. Now, let's talk about the Lions first. You know, we have plenty of other teams and players. It's a whole league wide full of players. But let's start off with the Detroit Lions. Give us a name or two of a guy whose stock has maybe rise a little bit, and maybe a name or two of guys whose stock has fallen with the third preseason game being out of the way.
One of the obvious ones I like to start with is just Marvin Jones.
Oh, yeah.
We made that transaction to get him this off season, and just personally to me, he's made the eye test. Like, he looks good. And it seems like Matthew Stafford's been favoring him quite a bit.
Yeah, big time.
On our offense. Another one at the running back position would be Theo Riddick. They've been using him all over the place. And he's definitely league renowned as a receiving back. And he led the league in receptions last year for running backs. And they're using him a lot, just running the rock. I've been surprised to see that, especially in this third preseason game. He had that nice spin move up the middle. Like,
yeah.
He's passing the eye test too. They like that guy. As far as fallers, two guys I'm getting kind of sour on. I mean, where there's an addition, Marvin Jones, Golden Tate. I mean, he's still going to be Golden Tate. I love him as a player, but when it comes to draft positions and whatnot, I think he's going way too high.
Right.
Because they got to spread that ball around, you know. And then also Amir Abdullah. Everybody loves this guy. I like his skill set, but with me being high on Theo Riddick, somebody else has to fall for somebody else to go up, you know.
Yeah, that's a good point. Like you say, with Jones too, especially. Just looks like from day one that rapport with Stafford is there, the chemistry, and he's going to bring some big things to the table. I'm expecting a big year from him as well. Now, let's look around to the NFL as a whole. The running back position is intriguing. It's kind of, you know, years ago, running back, hey, that was the position you draft in the first round. You probably draft in the second round. Things have changed, but it's still a very, very important position. You could argue whether receiver or running back's more important, but in a standard league, who is the top running back this year and why. Now we're talking about dynasty leagues. David Johnson, Ezekiel Elliott. Some of these younger running backs will definitely be at the top spot. But just in a standard league, 1 year, 2016, who do you have as the top running back this year and why?
The top running back this year standard. Obviously, it has to be injury permitting. If the guy plays 16 games, I'm going to have to go with my man, Jamal Charles. The reasons why would be just the way that offense is run. The guy has averaged 5+ yards to carry his entire season.
Right.
When they get the ball, magic happens. And the way Spencer Ware and Kendrick West, they handled themselves well last year, but it was a split. But it's unquestioned that if he's healthy, if Jamal Charles is healthy, he is going to lead the league in yards across the board. He's going to have 2,400 yards, and he's always up to put up those games where he gets 3+ touchdowns.
Yeah, he's always up there, like you say. The guy's a phenomenal player. You look back, and we probably can say this about I don't know how many Lions draft miscues. He was a guy that was there, available. I want to say it was the 3rd round. Forgive me if I'm wrong. And I think we went with Kevin Smith over him, and lo and behold, Jamal Charles. Some people were worried about his size out of Texas, and he's carved himself a very, very fine career. So there you go, guys. If you're looking at a running back for this year, provided the health, Big David here is saying Jamal Charles is your guy. Now, moving on to the receiver position. It could be a little tricky because, guys tend to come out of nowhere routinely. Sometimes it's like a random week where, the ball is being spread around and some random guy has a good game. And then sometimes guys have a complete, out of nowhere year. Allen Robinson, Jarvis Landry, these guys this time last year weren't really being talked about as much. Lo and behold, Allen Robinson just had a phenomenal season. Give me a few names of guys you think might explode onto the scene this year.
In my mock drafts I've done this off season, I'd say the guy I end up with the most in the later rounds is Torrey Smith. That's going to come out of nowhere. He's a forgotten soldier. He's gone to San Francisco. He's the number 1 guy there in a Chip Kelly ran offense. I don't care what people say how bad San Francisco is going to be. They need to throw it to somebody. And for going later too, I've liked what I've seen from Tajay Sharp in Tennessee. He's taken the place of Dorial Green-Beckham. For the most part, everybody thought that it was just coach speak, trying to motivate him, putting him with the third string guys, bumping Tajay Sharp up. But seeing him on the field, he's worked his way up there because of his skill set. It's not coach speak, and it's definitely by them getting rid of him to Philadelphia.
Man, those are some deep cuts there, Tajay Sharp. I like that, man. I'm jotting these down as you're saying it, man.
Another one that come out of nowhere. Oh man, the wide receiver is so deep. It's hard just it's like throwing darts.
Right. It is.
The way the league's set up right now, it's a pass happy league, and I've lost my note on that. Who's the other guy?
Jerry Mallory.
I lost my papers.
I heard he might.
Jerry Mallory. Yeah, he's going to be coming out of nowhere, light the season up.
Yeah, just light the season up, man. I heard he's not that fast, but he has a lot of heart. Hey, now check this out. We're talking strategy, and you gave us some receivers that might come out of nowhere. Now, in a standard league, so I'm not talking about PPR, points per reception. What positions do you value in the first round? Years ago, running back was just a no-doubter. They take him in the first, take him in the second round. How is your value on that? And then, as a follow-up, what's a good spot to take a quarterback?
The first round in general is based a lot off of the point scale system. In today's fantasy football, the way just football is played, and like you were saying with the running backs were top 5 picks, like hands down year after year. But the way the point scale is, if you're going standard, you could argue yourself into an Ezekiel Elliott, Todd Gurley, Jamal Charles, Lamar Miller,
right,
in the first few picks, as well as Antonio Brown, Odell Beckham, Julio Jones, the holy trinity of the wide receivers this year. It really just all depends on if you're drafting at the beginning of the round, the latter end, and just the makeup of your league mates. I can't stress enough, You got to know your league. You got to know the people that you're playing with and how they draft. And if you know that there's a guy that's going to be waiting for you, by all means, draft accordingly. Go running back early. People are trying to do 0 RB, doing 3 wide receivers in the first 3 rounds. But if a guy's waiting for you, you might as well take him. I draft skill. You can't pass up a good guy just because you have a set strategy. You know, the strategy is to have multiple strategies.
I agree. And I mean, I don't know, man. Maybe I'm just old school. I think there's a handful of receivers that are target monsters. No matter what, every game they're going to get an extreme amount of targets. But I don't think it's like 5 or 6 receivers that category falls to. Other than that, I'm still liking running backs, man, because if you're starting running back, you're going to get the ball 10 to 20 times every game. And so, you know, I don't know about that 0 RB receiver, because by the time you get to the 3rd round and you already picked those 2 receivers that maybe they're target heavy, that 3rd round receiver you're picking, you know, he may get a lot of targets one week, he might not, and you might be passing up on a running back that every single week is getting, you know, 10 plus carries. But like you say, it depends on your strategy, depends on your league, and definitely the way the points are scored, because, you know, every league's got their own little wrinkle that changes things. Now, you know, we always like to talk about the guys that came out of nowhere, and you gave us some really good ones at the receiver position. But let's flip the script. Who are a few players at any position that you're expecting to see a big decline fantasy-wise this year? They might still have a good year, you know, but like you say with Golden Tate, hey, not saying he's going to have a down year, but with Marvin stepping on the scheme, maybe his stats drop. Who are you expecting to have a big decline in fantasy this year?
In fantasy, I'd say a PPR darling, Jarvis Landry, is going to have a big drop this year. With Devontae Parker coming on at the end of the year, and the way Kenny Stills has built up that rapport with Ryan Tannehill through the preseason, I think the new offense is going to spread the ball out a lot more. And Jarvis Landry is going to see his reception total dip below the 100 mark. I mean, he'll still be a PPR fanatic, but he's not going to be that 110, 115 reception guy anymore.
Yeah.
Also, I'd like to point out in Tampa Bay, Doug Martin, the muscle hamster himself. I think he's going to have a slight decline. With Charles Sims. Charles Sims, every year, he just looks better and better as more of not just a backup, but just a standalone asset to that team. And I just think they include him a lot more to where it's a 50-50 split. And then I'll scoot over to QB. And the popular one would be Blake Bortles, which I totally agree with, but I'll go to Carson Palmer of Arizona. I think he's going to digress. He's going to go more to the mean of where he should be. I mean, Arizona's a high-powered offense, but I think just the way that the offense was run last year, they were a little bit more pass-happy than what they really want to be. And obviously, if that happens, they're going to bump up on the running back, so you can take that as you will. But Carson Palmer, I think, is going to have a dip compared to, especially at his draft position. I'll stay with the QBs too with Cam Newton. I won't say too much on that, but he had record-breaking years in efficiency, which just cannot be duplicated.
Yeah, that's a good point.
He's going in like the 2nd, 3rd round in drafts, and it's just way too high for my taste, at least.
I like those names, man. Jacksonville, you know, you mentioned Bortles briefly. I think him and Robinson see a dip. You know, they were down so much last year. You know, that defense was so bad, and defense probably will still struggle, but it won't be as bad. Those guys are playing behind, like from the 2nd quarter on every game. And so, you know, the passing yards, they're going to drop. You know, they won't be throwing as much. They had to throw just so much last year. I'm expecting Bortles to take a dip as well. And like you said, Cam Newton, that's a good one because, you know, just the ability to duplicate what he did, it's just not going to happen. Now, we got one final question. Let's take it back to the Lions before we let you get out of here. This is for week 1 only.
Okay.
Week 1, you've got the Detroit Lions going up against the Indianapolis Colts. Now, both teams have a good offensive potential, okay? We know they have weapons. We've seen it happen before. Detroit's defense is probably considered to be a little bit better, but then Andrew Luck is considered to be the better of the two in fantasy and in real life. Now, you also add the fact that Vontae Davis, who is, their stud cornerback, he's out. So that's an advantage to Matthew Stafford because, their best secondary guy won't be playing. So with all that information, if you own both quarterbacks, who are you taking between the two, Luck and Stafford, as they go up against each other in week one? Just week one alone. You own those two quarterbacks. Who are you taking?
Oh man, you're killing me with this. I would love more than anything to just throw down and just be a fanboy, say Matt Stafford.
Right.
But I gotta go with Andrew Luck and that receiving core they have. They're going to do 3 wide sets a lot, and like you said, with Vontae Davis not being in, I think the way the game's going to pan out is Detroit's going to be up a little bit, and we're going to try and just run the rock and control the clock in the game, and Indianapolis is going to be pass happy. So I'd have to lean towards Andrew Luck.
Got to go with Luck, man. Hey, Moncrief, I think he's going to do pretty good, man. Him and Luck had a little bit of rapport.
Oh, likewise.
T.Y. Hilton, I think when the season is over, I think Moncrief is going to have a better season than T.Y. But, hey, listen, man, don't be a stranger. Although we know the draft and everything's going to be taking place in the next few weeks, I know you'll have plenty of fantasy goodness over on your site. And hopefully you can join us during the season, man. Maybe we can do something, 4 or 5 games in through the midway point and join us again, man. Thanks for joining us this time, and we look forward to talking to you in the near future.
Oh, yeah, thanks. It was a pleasure.
Jerry Mallory here for the Hindsight 20 podcast. Your ad can be placed right here. It's simple. Send us an email, hindsight20podcast@gmail.com, and we'll make it happen. All right, we're back on the Hindsight 20. I want to thank once again David Daneker for joining us on the show. Let's close this out. I want to point out some positives and a few negatives in terms of this third preseason game. Then we'll end the show with my 53-man roster prediction. The offensive line was a positive. Now, Travis Swanson had a really good game, but I was most pleased with Taylor Decker. Now, he was pitted up against Terrell Suggs on a number of occasions. Matt Judon, he moved to left and right a little bit as outside linebacker, and Decker held his own. The first game of his career as a Lion was shaky. We all saw it, he did not look good. But he's progressively got better. I think the Cincinnati game, we saw some improvement from what happened when he went up against James Harrison. And in this game, he played really good. And it gives you that confidence to see this young man maturing right before our eyes. Terrell Suggs coming off an Achilles. He might not be 100%. It might not have been vintage Terrell Suggs, but it's still, I would put him as an elite pass rusher, even at his, getting up there in age, his advanced age and his injury history. Decker held his own. The whole offensive line I was pleased with, but particularly Taylor Decker. On the defensive side, 3 guys that really stuck out. Kyrie Thornton, big Ashawn Robinson, and then Tavon Wilson. Kyrie Thornton's going to be on this team, guys. He's earned it. The defensive tackle situation is loaded. It's crowded. And he's probably one of those guys that when initially he signed, you just don't think he's going to have a chance. He's a camp body. Well, he comes in incredible shape for a defensive tackle, with the weight loss and the practices, he's looked good. And in actual games, how can you really cut this guy? I mean, Karan Reed, who's a little bit younger maybe, or been on your team longer. Gabe Wright's a little bit younger. Steph Charles, more of a name. How can you really put any of these guys over Kyrie Thornton? You can't, and you shouldn't. He's been playing really well. Ashawn Robinson is a strong individual, okay? We knew that when we drafted him. We're seeing it. He's pushing that line. He's getting that pressure. He's not going to get sacks, okay? We've been kind of spoiled, with Sue and then with Fairley. We're used to defensive tackles that get after the quarterback and bring them down. That's not what Ashawn Robinson is here to do. He will bring the quarterback down, occasionally, but he's been brought in to collapse that pocket, to compromise, whether it's a run or a pass, to compromise and collapse that pocket. He's been doing that. The first 2 picks, Decker, Robinson, I could easily see both of them being plus starters, okay, for the next 3-4 seasons. You like what we're getting from both of them so far. Can't say the same about Glasgow and Killebrew yet, but time will tell on those. Those are your first 4 picks this inaugural season with the Bob Quinn era. Then Javon Wilson. To me, the guy just looks fast, man. He really does. He's getting around. Raphael Bush was handed the job. We knew Killebrew wasn't going to be ready, but Wilson has been playing really well, always around the ball, and he just looks faster, okay? Raphael Bush, the whole knock was when he plays, he's good, but he's been injured. I don't know what direction they're going to go in, if they'll just say, hey, flat out, Wilson, is your job. I think they're leaning that way because he's earned it, in my opinion. So those are just some guys that really stood out. You got 2 guys coming back from injury, Amir Abdullah and DeAndre Levy. These guys are good, all right? They're both still rusty, but they looked well. You could clearly see an upgrade between whoever's behind them who has been playing. DeAndre Levy, he was getting those tackles, man. He was all around the field. The guy has to stay healthy. It's important. We think he will. Amir Abdullah, it's the same. He had an up and down 2015 rookie campaign, but the moves are there. He has a little bit of power. He lowered that shoulder, showing he's not hurt. I don't know if it was the surgically repaired shoulder or not that he lowered. I believe that was on Jimmy Smith. But the moves and everything looks good. We know he's elusive, and it was good to see him in that capacity. Marvin Jones looks legit, guys. I've been talking about Jones before he was a Lion, when we were making predictions about, who should be a free agent target, especially after Calvin retired. He had some interest from New England and a couple other teams. The guy's good. He's making difficult catches, and that's very good to see. Him and Stafford seem to have a nice little rapport, right from the beginning. You like the fact that Nevin Lawson is scrappy, okay? He gets picked on. You're not going to look at Slay that much or as much. And Lawson isn't as good. And he'll give up some plays, and he's not going to be spotless, but he keeps battling. I like how early in that game he got picked on a little bit. He just kept going. They say he's one of the hardest workers. Sidebar, I really like Chris Spillman. His analogies, his analysis, he's smart. He knows the game. And I just like his delivery. He talked about how scrappy and how, fiery Nevin Lawson is. Love that about him, and you still see that, so that's cool. Now, in terms of some negatives, that pass rush to me, I've said this about Ziggy, and some people are going to say, man, you just don't like, I do like Ezekiel Ziggy Ansah. I just feel like, when you get the 14.5 sacks, there's just too many plays in between where there isn't constant pressure on the quarterback. I feel like that's going to be an issue with this team. I really do. I don't see that speed rusher. I don't see that specialist. I really wish we would have went after Dwight Freeney. Not saying we didn't. He's with Atlanta now. Even in the draft, I was looking at guys like Noah Spence. We don't have that true, even if it's just a specialist, okay? A one-trick pony on third down, that guy gets in there. We're going to have to get that from other ways. I think DeAndre Levy's going to have to blitz some this year. Kyle Van Noy. Blitzing Quandre Diggs as a nickel cornerback, because I just don't see the pass rush. And it's an issue for me. You can look at the end of your sack totals, but some teams get constant rush. We know how it goes. Okay. We had plenty of that when you were looking at Kyle Vanden Bosch, Corey Williams, or Nick Fairley and Dominican Sutcliffe, Averill. Even when they weren't bringing the quarterback down, it was just always a constant rush. There's just too many plays, in my opinion, where the Lions, this was even last year. And so when you see it in the preseason, it holds more weight because it's like more of the same potentially. But where the quarterback just has 3 and 4 seconds in a nice, easy pocket to get that nice, easy throw off. Certainly don't see that enough on the other side with blocking for Stafford. And so I do worry about that. Another negative, Landis, he's gone, man. And it's sad to me. You spend a draft pick on a long snapper. He should be a perfect long snapper, okay? I don't think it's going to happen. Don Milback has secured his job, in my opinion, and that's all I have to say in regards to Landis. I'm not spending a bunch of time on a long snapper. I'm just a little upset that we drafted a guy at that position if he's not going to be perfect, okay? It's a long snapper, shouldn't have any mistakes, but here we are, and I think Don Milback. I mean, how many generations of Lions players will he play with? He played with Joey Harrington, to Calvin. Now, the new regime, will it be, some random 2020-something draft pick that will say he also played with? I mean, how long will this guy play? He just keeps fighting. This is the first year I think his job was in jeopardy with the new regime. but I'm willing to say his job is now safe. All right, guys, let's close the show with our 53-man predicted lineup, okay? For quarterbacks, I got us doing 3 guys, all right? Stafford, Orlovsky, Rudock actually making the team. Rudock looked a little rough this game. He was creeping. I don't think he would have ever taken Orlovsky's spot as a backup. Our backups suck, man. And that's all there is to it. Rudock's young. He could learn. Orlovsky, Stafford, just stay healthy, bro. Because if you don't, I think we're in bad shape. Running backs, again, guys, really no surprises for my 53-man prediction. Not really. You've got Amir Abdullah. You've got Theo Reddick. You've got Dwayne Washington. You've got Zach Zenner. And then for fullback, you've got Michael Burton. Now, the only little trick I'll put in, because Zenner, to me, has not looked good this offseason or preseason, I'd actually put Dwayne Washington as my 3rd-string running back, believe it or not, right here, right now, with a slight edge over Zach Zenner for carries. But that could go either way. In terms of receivers, no really big surprises. You've got Golden Tate. You've got Marvin Jones, Anquan Bolden, TJ Jones, and Andre Roberts. He's earned this job. He's looked good. He can provide on special teams. Jay Lee, Quinshaw, Davis, Jace Billingsley, they've all looked good at several moments of the offseason, some training camp, some, OTAs, preseason, but ultimately I say 1 or 2 of them make the practice squad, and but none make the roster. Just hasn't done enough. Jay Lee's been kind of disappointing. For me, he was the biggest name out of Baylor, and he showed a lot of promise in the offseason with practices, but just really nothing at all now that the season is here. At tight end, you've got Eric Ebron, you've got Mulligan, and you've got Wick. It's simple. Corliss, he'll be on the outside looking in once Brandon Pettigrew gets healthy. I think, at that point, you've got to decide what you want to do. If Wick is showing that he can be a bit of a receiver, then I think he actually stays, and then Mulligan is replaced by Brandon Pettigrew. Offensive line, we'll start with our tackles, Michael Ola, Taylor Decker, Cornelius Lucas, Riley Reif. We got to monitor this whole Ola injury situation. At this point, I'm assuming he's healthy enough to dress and to play come first game, but we'll have to wait and see. In terms of our interior line, Larry Warford, Laken Tomlinson, Joe Daw, and Jeff Schwartz. Again, with Schwartz, the injury situation, we'll have to wait and see. Maybe this new guy from San Francisco, gets some run because Schwartz is not healthy. Then at center, you got Travis Swanson and Graham Glasgow. Now, moving on to your defense, you've got Ziggy Ansah. You've got, like I said, no big surprises, okay? The roster is really shaping up and being quite clear at this point. So you've got Ziggy Ansah, Devin Taylor, Wallace Gilbert, Brandon Copeland. Like I said, I really wish we had more of a true speed rusher, a guy that can just get in there, a specialist, a Bruce Irvin type guy on our team, because I just see that being an issue, but we'll have to wait and see. Defensive tackle, it's a lot going on, man. A lot of competition. There's a lot of guys. The guys I'm saying making the team got 5 defensive tackles. Some people say we might even go 6. I think that's a little bit too much. Haloti Ngata, Teron Walker, Kyrie Thornton, A'Shawn Robinson, and then Steph Charles. Steph Charles beats out Karan Reed. He beats out Gabe Wright. Part of it because his versatility, he can line up a little bit at defensive end as well, so he gets the nod. Now at linebacker, I don't know exactly how they're going to go about this. Right now, I 5 guys I know are making the team. It's Levy, Van Noy, Tyre. I thought it was Tahir. We all thought it was Tahir. It's Tyre Whitehead, Josh Bonds, Antoine Williams. I'm really thinking that 3rd guy comes from outside the organization. They made a call about Barkevius Mingo. And so I know it's a cop-out not giving you a name. I can give you a Goodwin or Gooden, whatever his name is, something like that. I really feel like that outside linebacker, or even if it's a middle linebacker, is going to be signed. As we see some roster cuts, I think just put a question mark, a mystery, a silhouette for that next linebacker spot. I don't think he's on the team right now. It's unfortunate Bostic with the injuries, because he would have been that guy. In the secondary, cornerbacks, Darius Slay, Nevin Lawson, Quandre Diggs, John Botamosa. That last spot, man, Darren Walls is kind of in the mix. Alex Carter is kind of in the mix. Just based off play, Darren Walls is better. Alex Carter has more upside. Perhaps they go heavy on cornerbacks and they just go with 5 linebackers. At that point, Carter and Walls makes the team. I actually think Walls would make it, And then Carter is on the outs. Maybe that is a surprise to some of you. He just has not done enough so far. And remember, this isn't a guy that was drafted by this regime, okay? You've got a guy that Martin Mayhew looked at, Martin Mayhew liked, and Martin Mayhew drafted. Quinn is not going to have the same amount of loyalty that the old regime had for these guys because he didn't bring them in. At safety, you've got Glover Quinn, Devon Wilson, Miles Killebrew, Raphael Bush. And then special teams, long snapper Don Mulback, however you want to pronounce it. Big Donnie Mayhem sticking on the team. Sorry, Mr. Landis. And then kicker or punter. Hey, we already know who those guys are. Matt Prater and Sam Martin. All right, guys, that's going to do it. We've got one more preseason game to go. We're so close to the real thing, and I can't wait. But until then, we'll be back next Monday talking Lions preseason game 4. It's all over. Everyone stay healthy. And hey, you guys stay healthy. Just wait patiently. We're 2 weeks away from Lions football. I know you're excited because I am too. I want to thank each and every one of you for listening. As always, I can be found at Jerry Mallory NFL. Check me out on Pride Detroit. And until then, this has been Jerry Mallory thanking you for listening to the Hindsight 20 podcast.